What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. This is the Total Takedown for UFC Vegas 63. Lines are brought to you by Superbook Sports. This is Pub Sports Radio. Make sure you hit me with a subscribe. Hit that like button before you leave the video. It really helps. Let's talk about this card from a totals perspective. This one, we talk about totals a lot, especially on this show. Literally the name of the show. But this might be the best way to play this fight card this week. These favorites and these underdogs, this card is so sketchy, top to bottom. Like, I could make a case for any single one of these fighters shitting the bed. You might be safer playing the totals this week. So let's dive straight on into it. We've got a late fill-in, Josh Weems taking on Christian Rodriguez. Now, Josh Weems is not somebody who we are necessarily overly familiar with. I need to go back and do some research, take a look at this kid, see what he's good at, see what he's bad at. Christian Rodriguez, on the other hand, is somebody I have been waiting to come back to the cage. I am super hyped up on this Christian Rodriguez and what he is capable of. Total set at 1.5 for this one. With a short notice replacement fill-in situation, we don't know what the training situation looks like. We don't know what the gas tanks look like. I'm going to lean on the under 1.5 at plus 145 here. Put a pin in that, folks. I need to do my research on Josh Weems before I can say that with any sense of certainty whatsoever. So take that one with a bit of a grain of salt. Carlos Mota taking on Cody Durden. Total set at 2.5 for this one. Over 2.5 is plus 120. The under 2.5 is minus 140. What we've seen from Cody Durden, he pushes that wrestling pace and he really kind of forces a brawl. He's got hands, but he's kind of a cardio-based fighter, which means he'll break his opponents if they tend to slow down over the course of the fight. He himself can be cracked and has been broken. He's been tapped and submitted a couple different times, and that's kind of the way I see this fight going. I think Carlos Mota is a solid prospect. Another kid a lot of people have been waiting to see get some action here in the UFC. I'm going to say under 2.5. Minus 140. Let's look at violence for that second fight of the night. Steve Garcia taking on Chase Hooper. Total set at 2.5. The under is minus 145 for a 2.5. The over 2.5 is plus 125. And again, I'm going to lean on that under 2.5. On the Monday show, I kind of leaned more towards the over just because we have seen Steve Garcia get backpacked by someone like Luis Pena and just kind of was able to ride it out. Good, solid submission defense. Really just kind of minded his positions and survived that fight with Pena putting on kind of a wrestling grappling clinic. Chase Hooper doesn't really fight the same way that Pena does, though. He doesn't have the wrestling upside that he does. He's working on that karate. He's working on his striking. Steve Garcia comes forward and gets wobbled and rocked in every single fight. He's been knocked out in his last couple losses. I think Chase Hooper might be able to get the first standing TKO of his career in this spot, and even if this thing does turn into a messy scramble, Steve Garcia's ground and pound is filthy. Like, Chase Hooper's got the brickest head of all bricks, but that's not going to stop him if an official decides to step in and wave it off if he's getting pounded relentlessly. On the reverse, if he gets on top of Steve Garcia and goes to work with those elbows like he did in his last fight, this one could get called. So I'll say violence, under 2.5, minus 145. Jun-yong Park taking on Joseph Ugly Man Holmes, another 2.5 mark here, over 2.5 minus 140, under 2.5 plus 120. And this one's harder. This one is a bit tougher. So Jun-yong Park has been rocked in a couple of fights. He's been submitted in a couple of fights. Joseph Holmes, we saw the amount of damage that he took in his UFC debut, was able to hang in there, nearly got knocked out late in that fight. Jun-yong Park, though, usually mixes in the wrestling really well. He likes to take his fights to the ground. He's going to be at a severe reach disadvantage here in this fight. So I could see a lot of grappling heavy control from someone like Jun-yong Park in this spot. And if he just sits on Joseph Holmes, then this thing flies over the total. However, if he has trouble with the reach and the range of Holmes, Holmes is pretty dangerous on the feet. He's got that long jab. He's got that big old step-in knee. Those advantages are going to cause Jun-yong Park to get in here, force him to fight, force him to brawl. That's going to open up the grappling scrambles. That's going to open up potential submissions for Joseph Holmes. I'm going to say under again. Let's go under 2.5 at plus 120. I think Jun-yong Park by decision is maybe the single most likely outcome, but when you're factoring in both fighters and what they do, I think the under at plus 120 probably makes a little bit of sense. Not as confident in that one, but got to pick a side, right? Marcos Rogério de Lima taking on Andrei Arlovski. Total set at 2.5. The over minus 135. The under is plus 115. And yikes, this is a sketchy fight. So Andrei Arlovski is a decision machine. If you think Andrei Arlovski is going to be in the driver's seat in this fight, you bet the over 2.5 and you do it with prejudice. Marcos Rogério de Lima is a big hitter these days at heavyweight. He swings for the fences, and Andrei Arlovski is no stranger to getting chin checked in these fights. So Marcos could put this fight out early, and on top of that, the man's a notorious gasser. If you get on top of him, he's got nothing for you. Arlovski could find his way to a finish or a submission if he just manages to get in top of a ground scramble, or if, God forbid, he decided to go to the takedowns himself. Andrei Arlovski could have massive success and probably find a finish. The thing is, we've seen what Arlovski does these days. He doesn't really change his game plan these days. At 43, 44 years old, he's going to try to stay to the outside. He's going to try to use his jab and counter, lunge his way in, and when that happens, I feel like we might have a car crash type situation. If either guy gets on top and we hit the mat here, I feel like this fight could be over. Believe it or not, I'm going to say violence. I think Marcos Rogério de Lima probably cracks Andrei Arlovski early, and if he doesn't, he either slows and tires out, or this thing hits the ground and one of these guys dies in the middle of the cage. So under 2.5 plus 115, that's what we're going to go with. Roman Dolidze taking on Phil Hawes. Total at 2.5. The over is even money plus 100. The under is minus 120. And I'm actually going to go a little contrarian on this one. I'm going to say over 2.5 at plus 100 is the move. So Phil Hawes has kind of started to round his game out. He's got the good solid wrestling. His cardio looks better. The fight IQ is much improved. The durability is just the big, gigantic, looming question mark here. Roman Dolidze has kind of the opposite problem. His durability is never in question. However, his fight IQ massively is in question. If he's not bombing on you or ripping your heel apart, then he's not going to get the win in this case. He does not win minutes. It's a big head kick. It's big elbows. It's ground and pound. It's ankle locks. Like, that's how he's going to win, is via finish. I think Phil Hawes can outpoint this guy. I think he can beat him on the feet with technical striking. I think he can stay safe if he mixes in the grappling and the wrestling and gets on top of him. Solid submission defense. Mind your P's and Q's. But I think that also lends itself to grinding Phil Hawes to a decision win. That's kind of the way I see this thing going. Now, frankly, at any point in time, Dolidze could catch him with something coming in. And the other way around, Phil Hawes, it's not like he's a guy that doesn't have power. Even though we don't see Dolidze get hurt, even though we don't see Dolidze get finished, doesn't mean it's not possible. So the under is absolutely something that could show up here. I'm not going balls to the wall, putting a lot of money on this or anything like that. I'll pick over 2.5 even money for my play here for the total. Dustin Jacoby taking on Khalil, Rountree. Total set at 1.5, over minus 155. The under is plus 135. And again, this is one where it's so tough to pick because I could see both ways happening extremely easily. Khalil Rountree seems to be a round one monster, and we've seen Dustin Jacoby. His durability is a massive, massive question for me. I have concerns about him being able to take punishment, and Khalil starts fast. The thing is, with Khalil, he falls apart. Like, he's a confidence fighter. As soon as the tide turns on him, he loses everything, shells up, and completely gets wrecked. Dustin Jacoby will have his opportunity in this fight to turn the tide and put Khalil down. And I think this could happen particularly early. The way Khalil hits at 205, he's a massive, explosive, powerful man. Under 1.5 at plus 135 is probably the look here, Dustin Jacoby versus Khalil Rountree. But at the same time, these guys are both high-level strikers. It could be a very technical battle if they decide to respect each other's power, stay at range, have more of a kickboxing fight. This thing could go all 15. So it's one of those ones that I frankly want no part of. I think it's going to end early. Plus 135 is tempting for this thing to end fast, but, you know, it's up to the game plan these fighters choose, and we're not going to know that until the cage door closes. Tresean Gore taking on Joshua Fremd. Total set at 2.5. The over is plus 110. The under is minus 130. This is another 2.5 for this one. Tresean Gore got knocked out in the first round his last fight, switched camps, coming back with new motivation. Just heard an interview where he's talking about how his mom's leg got amputated and he's trying to fight to, get her back on track and build a better life for her. Broke down crying at media days. Like, that's the kind of emotion, frankly, from fighters that I like and I want to bet on. And also leads me to believe that he's going to come out aggressive in this fight, trying to get some kind of a finish, win this thing early. Joshua Fremd, solid, well-rounded, another Factory X Muay Thai guy. Good, decent striking, solid grappling, good transitions. Lost to Anthony Fluffy Hernandez in his last fight. This is a step down, and Gore frankly needs to win to stay on the roster at this stage. I think both these guys can finish. The under 2.5 at minus 130, sign me up. That sounds like the way to go because Gore's going to come out and try and make a statement, win this thing however he needs to, and I don't think either of these guys are capable of or incapable of being finished. I think they can both go down here. Jared Vanderaa taking on Cortes-Acosta. Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Read that backwards. Total set at 1.5 for this bad boy. Y'all know how I love my heavyweight overs. Over 1.5 is minus 140. It could be greasy. It could be hairy. I think this one goes over 1.5. So we've seen Waldo be super easy to take down. We've also seen him be less than technical. Low volume, Power puncher. That's what this guy does. Jared Vanderaa is going to have a reach advantage. He'll have a speed advantage. If he wants to use the volume striking, he'll be able to keep this thing at range. And God forbid, if Jared Vanderaa were ever to use his grappling advantage, he could take this man down quite easily off the cage, put him on the mat, and then once Jared gets on top of you, you're not getting back up. This guy is so big, so heavy. Even if he doesn't get you out of there, you're just not moving for the next 5 minutes. So for this thing to squeeze over 1.5, whether Jared decides to play it striking and keep it at range and piston poke and jab his opponent, or get on top of him, and Waldo's just not a guy he's able to quite get out of there early, I do think it squeezes over that 1.5. Minus 140 is a lot to ask against a power puncher taking on a guy that's been knocked out in 2 of his last 4 fights, but that's the only way I can look here in this particular spot, because Waldo tends to start slow. He lets his opponents get going. Once they get tired and slow down, then he cranks up. So Waldo, late in the fight, round 2, round 3, that's really when we start to see him shine. Jared Vanderaa, we've seen him go a full 15 minutes before, so kind of feel like this is your classic sloppy heavyweight over. Co-main event time, Tim the Dirty Bird Means taking on Max Payne Griffin. Total set at 2.5 for this one. Over 2.5 is minus 155. Under 2.5 is plus 135. Another one where I feel like it depends on who's in the driver's seat, right? If you're picking Max Griffin, probably thinking under. Tim Means is the more technical striker here in this spot, but he is older and his durability is a massive question mark. I don't have the same durability concerns with Max Griffin, so if Tim Means wins, it's probably a decision. If Max Griffin wins, it's probably a finish, maybe a decision. Tim Means does have some finishing ability in his back pocket there, but I'm really not expecting it to show up here in this spot. I will lean on violence. Again, I'll say the under 2.5, but that's mostly predicated on Max Griffin being the one finding the finish, whether it's a club and sub, a clean knockout. And honestly, if he goes to the wrestling and takes Tim down, Tim has a tendency to just leave his neck out there. This one could get hairy. Maybe a submission sprinkle. Maybe just a little sprinkle on that sub. A guy that never goes for the chokes. Maybe just a little sprinkle. I'm going to say under 2.5, plus 135. Main event time. Arnold Allen taking on Calvin Kattar. We got a 4.5 here for this one. Over 4.5 is minus 125. Under 4.5, plus 125. And frankly, I don't see why you wouldn't go over the 4.5 here in this spot. Calvin Kattar, as much as I want to talk about the accumulation of damage and the amount of punishment that he has taken, how do you not just keep on going back to the well with the fact that nobody can knock this guy out? He's been in there with the heaviest hitters in the division and no one has been able to get him out of there. I've got to continue leaning on the fact that he can just take a punch from literally anybody on the planet, and until I see otherwise, I'm not going to worry about it. I think that Arnold Allen is a super competitive fighter here in this spot. He's got heavy hands. He's got quick, accurate punches. He ran through his last opponent, but Hooker's got some durability concerns at this point. We've got questions about that. Even if he does hit Calvin Kattar with his best shot, I'm not convinced that a one-hitter quitter from him is going to be any harder than a one-hitter quitter from Josh Emmett. So I think that even in a loss, Calvin Kattar pushes this thing to the over with his durability. I'll say over 4.5, minus 145. That's the total takedown. Good luck on all your degenerate action, folks. We'll see you tomorrow for the undefeated post-weigh-in show. Let's roll.